Hello and welcome to week 4. I have another screencast Prezi for us today for this week as we move into Africa, the continent of Africa, and discuss Christianity and faith and justice herein. Uh, Please know that your proposals for your final projects are due on Friday. You can upload those. Those shouldn't be longer than a page or so, answering those questions that I've listed in the syllabus. Upload those to a Dropbox, and if you have any questions regarding assignments, type of thing that can be done for a final project, please send me an email and let me know. I'll try to get a flyer of some sort worked up and posted for you early in the week so you have a sense for what's going on. Know that you don't have to have your sort of final project all figured out at this point, right? But I'd like you to be thinking in terms of general direction. Where might you want to focus? And know that we still have Africa to look at, and we still have Christianity in Latin America to look at as well. So if you'd like to sort of have a general idea of something you might want to do, but save the specific content until we get to those sections, that's fine, but still turn in something that tells me sort of this is a general idea that I want to explore further. So we move into Christianity in Africa, right? So we looked at Asia, and I gave us one of these nice little prezzies about that. And when we looked at Asia, we looked a little bit at justice issues because we're dealing with colonization, colonialism. But we looked primarily at how Christianity really took root in some imported and indigenous ways in a couple of geographic regions within Asia. Now, as we look at Christianity in Africa, right, we're going to look less at sort of what was imposed from the outside, so how did Europeans and North Americans bring Christianity in, but we're going to look in the next 2 weeks a little bit more specifically at the issue of justice itself. And so how does Christianity respond? What kind of a voice does Christianity have within Africa with respect to justice? And so for this week we have a couple of different authors, right? One is from Ghana, which is right here, if you see my arrow, the country of Ghana, and the primary cultural group in Ghana is called the Akan people. They've got some fantastic ceremonies that are on YouTube, so if you're interested in the Akan culture, you can sort of just search that out on your own. That's Larby's article. The Oberotur article on ethics in Africa. He is from Nigeria. He is a Jesuit monk, priest. I guess I'm not Catholic, so what does that mean? Anyway, he's a Jesuit. But he's born and raised in Nigeria, but right now he teaches over here on the east coast of the continent in Kenya. So he sort of is writing from Kenya, even though he's from Nigeria over here. Next week, we're going to be looking specifically at South Africa and the fall of apartheid with Desmond Tutu, and that's way down here in the south. So we kind of have crisscrossed the continent here. In the face-to-face class, I normally bring in a book to class that's called Africa. It's a children's book. Africa is Not a Country. And it's a fantastic book, and it goes through the 44 different individual nations within the continent itself, right? And really does well to highlight the vast array of cultures, of peoples, of expressions, of religion, of customs, all these things. So in our discussions or in your final projects, right, if you're going to be talking about Africa at all, please do your best to not essentialize what Africa is in terms of one single thing. We can talk about Africa, we can talk about Christianity in Africa, right? But please know that just like Orebutur talks about, right, Christianity is, or just Africa itself is this sort of mixing pot. And so you get one kind of a brew over here in Nigeria, you get another brew up in Egypt, then you're going to get a completely different one down here in Botswana. So Africa is not a country, so please don't refer to it like it's a country. It is actually a continent, right? So a few just landmass sizes. We just discussed Christianity in Asia. Uh, Asia itself, if you count the islands and things, is around 44.5 billion square miles, right? The largest sort of continental mass on the planet. Asia has 3.9 billion people, and there's around 53 different countries. Africa, second largest land mass on the globe. Uh, Asia is 44.5 billion square miles. Africa is 30 million square miles, so quite a bit smaller, but it still leads the pack above the other ones. So if we want to compare that to, say, North America, North America is only 24 million square miles. South America is 17.8 million square miles. Australia, the smallest one of the bunch, 7.6 million square miles. So Africa far trumps in landmass size. North America itself, this is all the way from the top of Canada down to the bottom of, by Panama. The population in Africa, the entire continent, right, including Madagascar, 877 million people, and this was, I think, as of 2008. It may have been 2010. North America only has 500 million people. So as we move here, we want to look. So up here we have, here's Morocco, here's Spain, Gibraltar. The Rock of Gibraltar is going to be down here where my arrow's pointed. Portugal's on the side of Spain over here, as you know. The Portuguese, the Spaniards, generally most of the Europeans, when they're trying to get over to Asia to establish these new trade routes, right? And they've got this fantastic naval fleet. They're gonna sail all the way around this coast, right? All the way down around the Horn of Africa, up through the straits in between Madagascar and the main continent, and lodge over here, sort of the southern Kenya, Tanzania area before they cruise on over to India. They don't have a lot of stake, other than sort of European knowledge of North Africa, of Egypt, Libya. Europeans aren't that interested in the mainland of Africa itself. They just know that they have to get around here in some way. So we're going into Africa here. So here's a little different take with some of the political borders or boundaries highlighted in yellow here. But the Europeans are sailing around this massive landmass, right? So they have to cross over several different meridians on the globe, different climates, right? This whole center section are the tropics. You have the deserts here. They don't know anything about the interior. And as the Europeans, from the 15 to the 1800s, sail around here, they primarily just do that. They're not that interested in the cultures, they're not that interested in the resources up to this point. And in fact, Christianity itself doesn't really take root in any significant way within this continent, the main continent, until after the 1800s. Now that's quite interesting. That tells us a lot of things, right? So Christianity in the 1600s, when Matteo Ricci's running around Asia, right, it's already starting to take root in some significant ways. You already have a presence of Christians in India, right? But Africa says something else. So primarily the Portuguese and the Spaniards, they're interested in the resources of Asia. They're not really interested in the resources of Africa, right? Primarily, they can't see any when they come to port or create these ports all the way around the continent. There's another thing that's going on too. North Americans and Europeans begin to have this insatiable appetite for slave labor, right? You probably know something about this, or at least you should by now. Ghana is a significant country where European and North American ships are going to dock over here in Ghana. These massive uh, sort of fortresses are set up in order to facilitate the slave trade. So you've got people being taken, right? Uh, and it's not that difficult to extrapolate a reason why Christianity, the religion of these slave traders, right, isn't going to take significant root in this continent, right? Now, what happens, the tipping point for when Christianity begins to, gain some ground within and spread within the continent itself, happens in and around 1807. And in 1807, Britain abolished the slave trade. Right? They're starting pretty hot and heavy into their industrial revolution, which brings a whole different kind of slavery into the continent of Africa and extraction of its resources, and sort of Europeans and North Americans fetishizing Africa and Africans as the dark continent, right? Although Africa gets that nickname back with the Portuguese as well. But with the abolition of the slave trade, there's actually some concrete feet on the ground that actually start to lend Christianity a little bit of credence, right? And so after the abolition of the slave trade, you have Protestant and Catholic missionaries cruising in, and as primarily at this time, Britain and France, the two large world powers, they're going to set up colonies all over the continent. And primarily, if you have a British colony, it's going to go to the Protestants, and if you have a French colony, it's going to go to the Catholics. I'm going to cruise through here a little bit more. For my face-to-face class, I highlight some of the, at least some biblical passages that talk about parts of Africa, right? So we have the knowledge of Ethiopia, which is over here. So as of the first century, there is knowledge of at least this far down the end of the Nile. But as the Portuguese sail around, they come into a port and they set up these huge poles, right? And what this pole is, it's called a padrao. And a padrao is this sort of tribute thing, this statue, and on the statue there's going to be a plaque. And the plaque is going to give tribute to the Portuguese or the Spanish, whoever was the one building this, the king. It's going to give tribute to the Christian God, and it's going to give tribute to God, to Jesus in some way as well. And so what would happen is these sailors would come around, they would land on these things, and they served as kind of like a lighthouse to know, okay, I'm at the third Padrao. We know exactly where we're at on the map, so it's a boundary marker. But when they set these things up, they have kind of a religious ritual around this. Here's another one with the cross on top, right? And so picture yourself as an indigenous African. You see these strangers come in on these huge boats, right? Set up this thing, all stand around it, have this sort of sacred ceremony, and then take off, right? Well, the Portuguese saw, when they went back to their boats, these indigenous folks come out and begin to worship around these things. And the Portuguese thought, and this is part of the thing that leads to the Dark Continent piece, that these people have no idea what they're doing. They're worshiping this pole, which clearly has no, for them, spiritual significance in and of itself. It's a marker, it's a pointer for them. But because the Portuguese see these people worshiping them, they think they're backwards, they think that they have absolutely no religion, because they're worshiping these padraos like they worship their own totems. And here's a couple of different images of totems that were in play on the western coast of Africa by some of the different people groups. So they already, these African folks already have these sort of sacred religious symbols set up. So it's a natural step for them to think that there is some kind of power within the Padrao itself. Portuguese think that